The president had this to say about Vladimir Putin in a phone call with the BBC.
Are you done with him? I mean, I know that sounds a simplistic thing.
But I'm disappointed in him. But I'm not done with him, but I'm disappointed in him. So we had a deal done 4 times, and then you go home and you see he just attacked a nursing home or something in Kiev. I said, what the hell was that all about?
Do you trust him?
I trust almost nobody.
Well, some critics say Trump's 50-day timeline handed Putin a green light to finish his brutal summer offensive in Ukraine before facing any consequences. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev today dismissed the tariff threat as a, quote, theatrical ultimatum, saying Russia doesn't care.
While the country's foreign minister said he had no doubt that Moscow can cope with any new sanctions.
We want to understand what is behind this statement on 50 days. We really want to know what motivates the President of the United States. It is clear that he is under enormous, I would say, indecent pressure from the European Union and the current leadership of NATO, who impudently support Zelensky's demand to continue pumping him with modern weaponry, including offensive weapons at the expense of more and more damage to taxpayers in Western countries.
CNN's Nick Paton-Walsh joins us live now from London. So this 50-day deadline, and on the back end of it, potentially additional sort of crippling sanctions against secondary partners, people who, or countries rather, who buy Russian oil and gas. I mean, just walk us through what happens and what the sort of plan B is if Vladimir Putin isn't fazed at all by these economic threats.
I mean, I think the question is there any indication over the past 6 months that this is going to make the slightest difference to the Kremlin's attitude? And the experience of Donald Trump that's led into this moment is that it's not. What is curious about his decision here is the sanctions. Well, yes, we know that sanctions potential on trade between the US and Russia would be meaningless. The secondary sanctions on customers of Russian energy, the delay behind that is potentially designed to get China and India to pressure Russia into altering its thinking about diplomacy. But, you know, the task here is extraordinary. You're asking essentially China and India to replace their main source of hydrocarbons in under 2 months. They're more likely, I think, to conclude that Trump is going to change his mind or back down, as we've seen in the past 50 days with other deadlines that have indeed passed. We're hearing, though, also at the moment from our colleagues in Washington, suggestions that actually in a recent phone call between Trump and Zelensky, Trump indeed asked if it was possible for Ukraine to hit deeper inside Russia, asked if they had the weapon systems, and Zelensky responded suggesting they could potentially get them if they were given them by the United States, essentially raising the idea that on the Trump potential deck of cards here is the idea of maybe handing Ukraine longer range missile capability to hit deeper inside Russia. Remember, at the moment they have HIMARS of great accuracy for shorter range, ATACMS for deeper range inside that, both given by the Biden administration. Ukraine's already had significant success hitting targets deep inside Russia using drones that are deep strike, or even drones that are launched locally, like we saw during Operation Spiderweb recently too. But I think the fact that officials in the White House appear to have confirmed elements of this conversation would indeed suggest that they want to hold out the idea potentially that there's more capabilities that could come Ukraine's way. They do stress that Trump has tried to stop the killing here, and this is all about trying to end the war rather than anything else. But it's a really mixed set of messages that are being put out by the White House here, at the same time as giving urgently needed Patriot missiles that are essentially just removing restrictions that Trump put in place when he came to power on things that Biden was doing before him. There is urgent need for Ukraine being delivered, possibly in days or weeks ahead. We have this 50-day pause until damaging sanctions potentially hit Russia's allies. It's not going to do too much damage to Russia itself. And so the message here, complex. Certainly Trump changing his broader worldview that Russia needs to be stopped and Ukraine defended, but also not giving up, despite the evidence of 6 months, on the idea that ultimately the Kremlin wants some kind of deal here, and delaying sanctions, punitive measures that he's held out now for weeks or months for another 50 days, as you pointed out, potentially until all the damage of a Russian offensive is indeed done. That's September. That's a huge window in a war moving this fast.
Right, Nick Paton-Walsh, live for us. Thank you.
Well, for A View from Ukraine, let's bring in Alexander Mereshko. He is the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Ukrainian Parliament and joins us now from Kyiv. Alexander, it's good to see you. Let me pick up on the reports of this phone call from July 4th between President Trump and President Zelensky, where it appeared that President Trump had been asking about Ukraine's capabilities of launching deeper into Russia, even St. Petersburg, per this call in Moscow. The president of Ukraine reportedly responding, absolutely, we can if you give us the weapons. So in addition to these defensive weapons that the United States will be providing the Europeans to then provide for Ukraine, are you anticipating to see down the pike soon that the United States will also be providing offensive, longer range weapons?
Well, I don't know what President Trump and President Zelensky talked about, whether they raised this issue about offensive long-range missiles. I don't know about that, but Russia wants to continue to target civilian targets and infrastructure in Ukraine with impunity. And each time Ukraine responds in kind, it causes uproar in Russia. But to reach parity, to fight on more or less equal terms, of course, we need to use long-range missiles to respond to Russian aggression, because it's completely in line with Article 51 of the UN Charter, which gives us a right to self-defense. We are in line with international law by responding to Russian aggression and by using long-range missiles. And it's the only way how we can make Putin to negotiate seriously.
So in addition to needing, obviously, the defensive weapons that the US is providing, clearly there is a need for offensive weapons too in order to change the tide in this war. But I just want to get your opinion on what Donald Trump announced yesterday, this idea of trying to go after Russia's economy in order to get Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table. He's proposing this sort of 50-day window, and on the back end of this, essentially saying that, you know, he's going to charge or tax or tariff countries that buy Russian oil and gas 100% at a rate that you simply cannot do business at when you're talking about triple-digit tariffs. Just give us your take on whether you think that will work at all.
The truth is that the crucial question is how we can stop Russian aggression. And the only way to do it is to stop running a war machine, to deny Russia revenues which it receives from selling its oil and gas to such countries as China, as India, and to do that, to stop this lifeline provided by these countries. We can do it only in one way, by imposing secondary sanctions on those countries, on those companies which help Russia to feed its war machine. That's why these sanctions are absolutely necessary. But I don't understand why it takes like 50 days. It should have been done and could have been done long ago. And we don't need these 50 days because Putin might take it as a green light to intensify, to double down on his war efforts against Ukraine. There is a danger in this kind of new deadline.
Do you think that's how Moscow's interpreting this, that this is a 50-day window to perhaps start what many had anticipated, as we've noted, a summer offensive by Russia before there could be any potential consequences like these new sanctions that the president announced yesterday? Because all reporting suggests that President Putin still believes that Russia is winning this war and is capable of ultimately defeating Ukraine.
Well, we see that Russian army has bogged down in Ukraine, that we quite effectively resist and repelling Russian attacks. Russia has a huge death toll on the battlefield. But of course, Putin will definitely use 50 days against Ukraine because he is trying to conduct offensive operations without much success, but he will be trying to do it and continuing to do this. All our previous experience testifies to this, that Putin will definitely be using this to intensify, to escalate the war of aggression against Ukraine.
And I mean, just in terms of what it's going to take to get Putin to back down, I mean, Russia, by all accounts, I mean, obviously it doesn't like economic hardship, nobody does, but by all signs, it's willing to endure economic hardship in order to win this war. I'm not entirely sure whether the new proposals by Donald Trump are going to have the intended effect in terms of getting Putin to back down, at least economically, even if their economy is under pressure. And then, of course, with weapons, you know, that hasn't had an effect so far. So what will it take, do you think?
Well, first of all, strategically, Russia has already suffered strategic defeat because for more than 3 years, it has failed to materialize, to achieve the primary goals of its aggression. Russian economy shows some cracks, and the situation in Russian economy is deteriorating. So the thing is that we continue to be resilient, and Russia is not capable to occupy a huge part of our territory. But to be more effective, to defend ourselves, especially our civilian population, we need more military assistance from our closest allies, including the United States. And we still consider the US to be our closest ally and friend, and also from the European countries.